Hi, this is Frida doing the Module 3 Skills blog post. So I took the Leadership Skills questionnaire, and it turns out I was very high for interpersonal skills and moderate, on the high side of moderate, for administrative and conceptual, which really didn't surprise me at all. I feel like I'm much more dominant in the social skills arena than in like any other one. Being able to do the administrative side of things, managing resources, managing people, technical stuff, that sort of can initially seem overwhelming to me, and planning and problem solving, like the more conceptual things that I don't know if I'm always as good as that either, but things like judging how people might handle things and wanting to work well with others and wanting everyone to feel included as part of the team, things like that. I feel like I just have much more of a visceral response to and connection to. So that being said, as far as functioning as a manager and a leader in an organizational structure, I think, as the text pointed out, there's definitely a difference between management and leading. Managers tend to be good leaders, but leaders don't always have to be good managers. So I feel like where managers tend to do things to get the goal like done, like they are doers, they just handle it. And leaders are more inspirational to the group and want to reach goals through empowering and motivating. I feel like that is kind of where I shine. So in the model of care that I chose the shared governance model. And since that has to do with empowering nurses, everyone to achieve common goals, to set the standards and improve patient care that way, I feel like that is where I would be a good manager. Let's see. So skills from the leadership questionnaire that I thought were good for securing needed resources such as staff, I put problem solving, managing people and resources, being able to see the big picture, making strategic plans, immediately addressing problems, and obtaining and allocating resources. So all of those things are pretty, I'd say, equally important. Staffing is such a huge thing. I don't think it can be minimized at all. It's, it's sort of like the intersection of the business side and the caring side of being a nurse. Like, you have to make sure there's a very sensitive balance between being able to give the best care at the best cost because paying us is expensive and we got to run a business, but at the same time we've got to make sure we have what we need in order to do our job correctly. And so it's a problem I'm glad I'm not intimately in charge of at this point. The way our floor works is we have 20 beds on our floor at nighttime, which is when I work. Each nurse has 5 patients. There's a free floating charge nurse, and we have 2 nurse techs that have 10 patients apiece. And we're all sort of responsible for our own patients, but luckily I work on a floor where teamwork is really prioritized, so you never feel alone or anything. But there's definitely also like a division of labor between what the nurses do and what the techs do and what the charge nurse is going to do to help you. Additionally, there's some gray area. We call it the grid. It's like if we have 19 patients, we can have all of our staff. But if we have 18 patients, then we have to go down a tech. And then then during the day they have a secretary, so they can either lose a tech or a secretary. And then if we have, 17 patients, somebody with a higher pay grade than me figured it all out. I just do what they say. But additionally, there is some sort of gray area where with management's approval, we can sort of provide for acuity issues. If we have patients who are just like falls risks everywhere, like little confused old ladies on IV Lasix everywhere. Then there's sometimes, even if our census may not be 20, then for the purpose of safety, we might be able to have all of our staff. Another big issue with staffing is when patients need one-to-one sitters, that gets expensive quick. So before we have, even if a doctor has an order for a sitter, we have to call our manager at home, even if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, to get permission to have them, and then our charting better reflect the intense need to have this sitter. Another issue that I've noticed that I think is particularly relevant with nurses is maternity leave. We always either have somebody out on leave or somebody pregnant, and sometimes it's more than one person. So having people constantly out on FMLA for 12 weeks, not to mention, any issues that come up during the pregnancy, or if they don't feel like they can come to work. So more frequent call outs. And then, once you have kids, they get sick, and sometimes you have to stay home and take care of them. So that's definitely something to consider. So the management engineering data analysis, I think, is probably the one that I thought was best to have the best balance between cost and workload. So like I said, acuity level, fluctuating census, people being sick, those are all issues that you have to consider. Additionally, I think it's really important for flexibility and creative ideas for staff retention, because that is another big issue. If people don't like their job, they're not going to stay, especially nurses. We could go anywhere. I mean, that's the great thing about being a nurse is, there's so many different places to work, especially here in the Triangle where I live. So I think that it's really a major responsibility of management to be flexible and creative so they can hold on to the staff that they have, because training new staff is really expensive, and staffing for people before you find their replacement, expensive. Float pool staff make so much money, and having we don't really use agency nurses very much, but I mean that's a very big chunk of change. So sometimes I think, again, looking at big picture, it might be better on the front end to be a little more creative than on the back end to be without a nurse. So I read this article called Collaborative Transdisciplinary Team Approach for Dementia Care. And it gave some really great insight. It gave some really specific examples about how collaborative transdisciplinary approaches are used in a modern care setting. And it's also interesting to me. I always like to read articles about care being given outside of the hospital, because my experience is completely hospital centered. I've never done any sort of care outside of the hospital. So I always think it's interesting to see how other things are organized and what care is like outside of that place. So they like to emphasize that where there's multidisciplinary care, that term has been kind of thrown out a lot lately, that is more of like parallel services where there's no direct interaction between the people working on the case. And then a transdisciplinary approach is definitely much more of a team approach with different providers who work together. And the boundaries between all those care providers is kind of fluid, because it allows for people to, if they have a certain area of expertise, then they really can shine in that area. And then, other people can shine in other areas. And so it's definitely about collaboration. And so when you're a manager and you're in agreement that the transdisciplinary approach is the one that you would like to use, it's important that you staff when you're hiring people, that's when you really get to assess people for their values and their work ethic and the type of employee they're going to be, and if their values line up with the organizational values as we've discussed in previous modules. So you want to look for people that have a strong commitment to quality care, strong communication skills, because you're going to be working with people all the time, and people that really value their team members and what their team members have to contribute to the shared goal. So you definitely need to look for team players when you're hiring, because they're going to be the ones that'll work out best for implementing this type of care. As far as my preference for a vertical or horizontal structure, I definitely prefer the horizontal one. It allows for staff to have more autonomy and opportunity for initiative. And I think that it gives more authority to the managers that are closest to the people giving patient care. But again, you really need different departments to work together when you have this type of structure. But I think the horizontal structure, again, I think that's more in line with the shared governance style, which is what our floor does. So it's also just what I'm more comfortable and what I'm more familiar with. So that would be my preference now. I can't say that I've ever really worked in another one to have a non-biased opinion. But anyway, thanks for listening to me talk. And I'm looking forward to listening to you all and having a great discussion on our blog. So I hope everyone's enjoying, at least here, the weather's finally getting nice and pretty. So I hope everyone is having a nice balanced time between learning and being outside. Have a great day.